Hey everybody, welcome to yet another Nova Scribes. My name is Brian, and welcome to the Retooling You workshop series. Retooling You is specifically designed to help you stand up your facilitation practice. We're going to be covering really two big areas. One of them being the business of how do you stand up a practice on your own, and then the second would be facilitation tools and techniques. Today we're going to be focusing on the business side of things. Two things that you need so you can sleep at night. Okay. First thing that you need, I would say, is your safety net. Okay. Len, before we got started, you had said, well, I've already got my safety net. If you don't mind sharing, what is your safety net?
So I just retired in December from 27 years in service in the DoD, and that's my safety net. My retirement is my safety net.
Okay. So a way that you can think of, thank you very much, Len. So the way that you can think about your safety net is that this is really, you could call this your seed money. This is the money that you're setting aside to invest in yourself. Now, if you were doing like a business, I don't know, if you were selling widgets someplace, you'd need a storefront, you'd need to buy inventory. This is a little bit different. This is more like just setting aside the living expenses that you need in order to really focus on this being a full-time job, so that hopefully you get to the place where you can turn a profit. So let me demonstrate a little bit, and I'll zoom in. So let's say, for example, that your living expenses are $1,000 a month. Okay. I highly doubt that your living expenses living in around the DC area is $1,000 a month, but this is going to make the math a lot easier. Okay. The first thing you have to decide is how much of a runway are you going to give yourself before it's like, okay, after this, I just can't make this thing work. I'll start putting my resume out there. I'll start going back to some jobs I know. I will do this traditionally. So why don't we poll the audience a little bit? What's a good time horizon? How many months would you give yourself to turn a profit? Tiff, what do you got?
I'm conservative and risk averse, so I would say 6 months.
Six
That's how
months is a
much money
great
I'd
number.
like to have.
Okay, so let's
I
do
would
6
say
months.
I would say
Yeah.
a year,
A
personally.
year? Okay.
Yeah.
I think, and you have to pick the number that works best for you. Okay. There's not some magic answer here. So Tiff, it's 6 months, others it's a year. Sometimes, maybe you've got a lot of money socked away. You could do 18 months or 2 years, whatever that is. Sometimes it's like, okay, I really need to do this now. It's 3 months, whatever the number is for you that you're comfortable with. And you're saying, okay, I gave it a good shot. I was able to make this work or not, but I'm going to give myself X amount of time. So let's go with 6 months. Now, this is really, really simple math, and you can probably already see where I'm going with this. Let's see, let me stand up so that the camera can track me a little. But you're going to want to say, all right, if I need $1,000 a month to live, and I'm going to do this for 6 months, then somewhere I need to sock away $6,000. I would recommend that you earn that money, or you set it aside, or you take it out of investments, or whatever you need to do in order to get that, and you put that into a separate checking account that's irregardless of anything else that you do, and you draw down only against that. And you use that for your living expenses. You use that for rent, mortgage, car payments, gas, going to the grocery store, whatever it is. Now, you may have to make this kind of a thin number when you're getting started and not go to Starbucks every day to get a double whip, Frappuccino. You may have to be a little bit lean on those first few months because you are going to be drawing down against this. But what I would say is that for those moments when it's 2 a.m., you're 3 months into this, you're staring at the ceiling thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't gotten any clients yet. And there's that pit in your stomach where it's like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this work. That's okay. That's what that's there for. I gave myself 6 months. I have this. I've got a plan. I'm following the plan. And then after that, if I can't make it work, then I start putting my resume out there. Okay. So that's the first thing. And really what this is, it's nothing more than I like to think of it as sleep insurance, right? This is the kind of thing that allows you to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. And you're like, okay, I'm on plan. I haven't quite got where I want to be yet, but I am heading in the right direction. This is a pretty simple one. If you're lucky like Len and you've got a retirement you could draw off, you may not even need this. Before we move on to the next thing, I want to hear what questions you've got about this idea of the safety net. Any questions, comments about that one? Okay. You figure out what the right number is for you. You figure out what the right time horizon is for you. And again, that's your sleep insurance. Now, the next part of this is the big part. Okay. Sometimes we call this the book of business. I think that these are the two conditions by which, if you have these two things, you're ready to start a business. First, you need a little bit of seed money for yourself. You need a safety net. Then you have a book of business, also known as a pipeline. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you the entire Lizard Brain pipeline, the way that we think about our business from a life cycle perspective. But before I do that, let's do a little bit of brainstorming together as a group. Okay. How might you get clients? So this could be how you currently get clients, or how you get your leads, or where they come from. And really, there's no wrong answers here. And as soon as you've got one, just call it out and I'll make a list. You may want to follow along in your notes as well. Okay, whatever is relevant to you. But let's start with that. So where do you get your clients from? Just go ahead and shout it out.
Referral.
Referrals. Okay, so Sarah, what kind of referrals do you get? Where do they come from?
They come from coaching clients.
Okay, so like existing clients.
Yeah, and this includes like people who I've coached before I was running my own business.
So tell me a little bit more than that. So people that you had coached previously, so even like previous clients, right?
Yeah, like when I was an internal coach.
Okay.
At
Gotcha.
organizations, at firms and stuff. And so those people, when I tell them like, hey, I'm launching a business, they will send people my way.
Okay, so we might consider that one to be more like word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
I worked with Sarah. I know Sarah. I mean, they're the same thing. You know, I'm using the different language to say the same thing, but that would be like, I know Sarah. You're saying that you want to coach. Talk to Sarah. Okay. All right. So you've got, on the one hand, referrals from existing clients, and then you've got word of mouth. What else? Where else might you get some leads from?
Doing volunteer work in front of audiences that might hire me.
Totally. So you could do volunteer work. And, another word for that is, we call it pro bono. By the way, don't make the same mistake that I did. As a service, facilitation does not count. Pro bono service work does not count towards your taxes. It just doesn't. You have to give things away, like actually like physical stuff. I asked the question, well, what is all this stuff I hear about attorneys doing pro bono work? And they say, well, that's to maintain their licenses. It's not actually for tax purposes. Okay. So there's no tax benefit to doing pro bono work, but there's a huge, huge benefit to getting your name out there. Okay. So we've got about 3 good ideas. Where else might you get some leads?
Subcontracting with other consultants.
That's a big one, right? So, maybe you've got a friend, Chris, who's already got a big consulting firm out there. And Chris says, hey, Anita, can you come in and help us do this facilitation? Yeah, subcontracting to others. Contracting. Okay. What else? Where else might you get some leads from?
Speaking engagements.
Say again, speaking? Okay.
Speaking engagements, yeah.
Yep. So speaking, people see you in front of a group. They're like, oh, that's I love your point of view. Can you come and be my coach? Can you come and be my facilitator? Where else?
Publishing books that again
Publishing
express
books?
your views.
Yep. Publishing books, and you could actually expand this to say, not just books. You could also say articles, and that could be something as easy as like LinkedIn. Okay. Let me give you a few more that might be a little bit more targeted toward, and where we, since Chris came online, we've gotten pretty good about tracking our data. Okay. And so we tend to ask people, how did you hear about us? Where did this come from? Okay. So one of the sources is actually associations and memberships. Okay. Associations and memberships. I'll just tell you, in our area, in the Northern Virginia area, the DC area, that would be MAFN, the Mid-Atlantic Facilitators Network. Okay. Also IAF, the International Association of Facilitators, although they don't have a huge presence here in the DC area. From the facilitation angle, Voltage Control has actually got a pretty good community out here, and that would be one worth checking into. They run facilitation labs, usually at the MLK library once a month. That would be a good thing to go just to experience some facilitation methods and to meet some people. There's also CBODN, the Chesapeake Bay Organizational Development Network. There's also IFVP, the International Forum of Visual Practitioners. There is also, let's see, what else am I forgetting? ICF, right,
Mhm.
Sarah? There's the International Coaching Federation that's here.
Yeah.
What else?
OD network.
OD network. Okay. So yeah, so we've got MAFN, we've got IFEP, we've got voltage control. Oh, we've got NOVA Scribes. This is a good way to
Yeah.
meet people. NOVA Scribes, the OD network. And then there's also, like I said, CBODN, the Chesapeake Bay Organizational Development Network. The Georgetown program, Georgetown coaching program, gets together often, and you can be a member of that. It's kind of pretty cool. Anyway, these associations and memberships do pay off a little bit. Okay, so that's one. You've got subcontracting here already. There's also the idea of colleague referrals. Okay, and Sarah had mentioned referrals before, but this would be me saying, hey, I can't do this job. Sarah, are you available to do it? It looks like this is getting low enough that it's actually picking up my computer, not my thing. Okay. So this would be like a colleague referral. Hey, I can't do this work. Sarah, are you available to go and do that kind of thing? I would consider like the speaking arrangements, the publishing books, publishing, stuff on LinkedIn, getting blogs out there, or like, offering classes to the public. That's something else you can do. And by the way, if you have a class that you'd like to demo, NOVA Scribes would be a great place to do that. See me after class. You can consider that to be like self-generated. Okay. In a couple of months in June, I'm going to be teaching the Groves Principles of Graphic Facilitation. I've been meeting people who are just interested in that. They're coming in, and that's self-generated stuff. You also mentioned subcontracting. That is going and working for Tiff, or if she's got a job. One thing that you didn't mention was web search. Okay. So let's go ahead and get web search on there. Now, what does it take to show up in Google results? Somebody does DC facilitation. How do you get, on that list?
No,
Any
the term
thoughts?
is SEO, Brian, but I don't know how to do that.
That's the term. It's SEO. Okay. So there's a couple ways that you can, boost up your SEO. Any ideas?
And the only,
Making sure you have search terms.
yeah,
Search terms on your website. What else? Hey, Tim. Okay, let's dive into it just a little bit. The best way that you can boost your SEO other than actually paying for it, that's different. If you want to fork over some money and get a sponsored result, that's up to you. I don't know about you. Anytime I do a Google result, I just skip over the sponsored stuff and I just go to like, what is the first organic find? That's me. Yeah, so Ricardo says content creation. Absolutely. You can do that by posting a blog on your website. Now, the cool thing is that Google is, well, pretty smart. Yeah, Sarah says the titles of articles and blogs. Google's pretty smart. If you are connected to other things, like, for example, Substack or LinkedIn, Google knows that and it will attribute it out to you. In other words, one of the best things that you can do to boost your own website is to actually write LinkedIn articles. Okay. The more active that you are on LinkedIn, the more Google will recognize that you're out there, you're doing things, you're being active, and that will boost your SEO results. By the way, I'm not making this up. There's a really good book out there by William Arruda. The book is called Digital You. I actually got to graphic record for him. That's how I learned all this stuff. He had worked for LinkedIn and Google, so he knew the inside track on how the algorithms work. Now, he'd signed all these NDAs, so he couldn't say all of this stuff. But he did say, look, one of the best ways that you can boost where you show up in the ratings on SEO is to actually make sure that you're actively posting and reposting on LinkedIn. The more active you are, the better. Now, let me just say this, all the SEO stuff, the web search, sometimes I feel like that's just a furnace that I just keep shoveling coal into, right? But it does keep you out there and it does keep you present. Okay. All right. Before we get off of this, let's see, we've got word of mouth, we've got referrals, the volunteer pro bono stuff. I'd still call that that's that's self-generated things that you do. Are there any other sources that you can think of where you might get leads from? What else? That's a pretty good list. That's most of the ones I had. Anything else though?
Maybe being involved.
Social media.
Social media. Okay, so I might put like the social
Yeah.
media. That's kind of, I sort of might like kind of lump that in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I'm thinking specifically of LinkedIn, like if you have services that you offer and some people will just search for that and they'll find you and they'll say, hey, I'm looking for this.
Yep. So like LinkedIn services. Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
Okay. Anything else? By
This
the way,
might
this is your
be,
list.
this might be lumped in with word of mouth, but
Mhm.
being involved in the industry that you are targeting.
Tell me more about that.
So like I work mostly with nonprofits.
Mhm.
So just like networking and
Yes.
going to nonprofit alliance type events.
Yeah, definitely. Networking. Okay, totally. All right, very good. Now, let me show you where Lizard Brain stands with all of this stuff, because like I said, we do a decent job of tracking how we stand with most of this stuff, okay? So if you think about all of this leading to our leads, okay? And the way that I'm defining a lead is that that is somebody who sends us an email, sends me a text, fills out a form on our website, but in some way says, hey, we've got this thing, right? We've got this event that's coming up. We have this, you know, there's actually a need here. This is not just somebody that I know, but there's a project out there somewhere, okay? So if you consider 100% of our leads, here's how it stacks out. Here's how it stacks up for us, okay? 2% of our leads, we have absolutely no idea how they find us. They send us an email, we always ask, right? But they may not answer and say, well, yeah, how did you find us? And they're just like, you know, they don't even answer that. So 2% is a total mystery, okay? 9% are associations and memberships, okay? So I think it's worth it to be a member of Mathin. The find a facilitator function, that's a good thing. I'm certified in the Masters, in the Myers-Briggs. I get a lot of leads from just Myers-Briggs stuff that has nothing to do with graphic facilitation or even facilitation. They just want me to show up and do a Myers-Briggs thing. So being really targeted about which associations and memberships you're a part of. I wouldn't do all of them, but like, what are the ones that actually pay off for you? Okay, so that's about 9% for us at Lizard Brain. Colleague referrals. This one right here. This is the instance where like Sarah's busy, but maybe she kicks it over to me. That's 14%. Okay, it really, 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 really behooves you to maintain a solid network and good relationships. This is the whole idea that a rising tide raises all ships. And so like Sarah knows, you know, if she's busy, she can hand something over to me and I'm not gonna, I'm gonna do right by her and by the client, okay? I think it's a really good idea to be involved with the community because it literally pays off. That's what that's all about. Past clients, existing clients for us, that is 36% of our business. Now, quite frankly, I wish that that was a little bit higher, but a lot of the work that we do is one-off. You know, it's this one weird project that we might do once, and then they just don't need us again because the project doesn't repeat itself. Okay. Only 5% of our business do we get from self. So this is the classes. Now, these are specifically like classes that we offer. Okay. Web search, SEO, social media, that whole thing that we were just talking about, that only accounts for, in our case, 9%. Hey, I found you on Google. So again, only 9% of our business, ours anyway, comes from that SEO, somebody going out to the open internet and Googling DC visual facilitation. That's really low for the amount of shoveling coal that we have to do, but I feel like we still have to do that work. Then word of mouth for us, that's the remaining 7%. Now, let me just say this, Lizard Brain has been around for a while, okay? When we first got started, almost all of it was under word of mouth, okay? So these values, these proportions will shift over time. I think that this is pretty good for a mature organization, right? But as you're getting started, this may be a little bit higher. The more organic stuff will be a little bit higher. Okay, before I go to the other side of the equation, what questions do you have about this? Questions, comments, what's coming up for you? Okay, let's move on then.
Actually, I have a
So-
question.
Yeah,
Do
go for it.
you subcontract?
Do I subcontract?
Mhm.
It's the breakfast of champions. Yeah, we do it all the time. So yeah, I've had actually Tim and I were just talking about a potential subcontract that we might have coming up. Yes, I've subcontracted to Sarah when she was with Accenture. I think Sarah's actually worked for me a couple of times, unless I'm getting that wrong. Yeah. Here's the cool thing, right? When you're an independent, especially when you're an independent in this field, our projects are usually really quick. You know, we might have 1, 2, 3 days of facilitation. That kind of tempo is almost too fast to maintain a bench of employees, right? And so the solution for that is a lot of highly, tightly networked individuals who draw on each other on a moment's notice to say, hey, are you available to come and help me out with this thing? Okay. Speaking of that, let's back out of this one thing. We talked a little bit about the importance of being part of a community, right? You could read that as networking. This is the whole idea that a rising tide raises all ships. Let me geek out for a second here. Anybody ever heard of this product called Pampers? You know what Pampers is? Yeah, they're diapers. Okay. So when I think it was Procter & Gamble, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but the company that invented Pampers, when they actually came out with Pampers, here's what happened. Every dollar that they spent on marketing resulted in more sales. So they spend more money on marketing, they get more sales of Pampers, right? Disposable diapers, new thing, right? I don't have to clean stuff out. Wow, this is great. Until a point where the sales plateaued. So they kept dumping money into marketing, but the sales didn't go up anymore. And what happened there? They realized that they had penetrated the market. They had complete market saturation. Anybody who was going to buy Pampers was already going to buy Pampers, okay? Now, let me just say, it happens enough that when I start a graphic recording and I say, okay, I'm going to be doing this thing called graphic recording. I'm going to be taking a big piece of paper, drawing on the wall. Who has seen this before? And maybe a quarter of the hands go up. I don't think we are anywhere close to market penetration. And so what that means is the best thing that I can do to raise opportunities for my business is to give business to other people, okay? The more exposure I get, the better. So if I can't do a job, I'm not just going to say, hey, sorry, can't help you. Bang. I'm going to call Sarah and say, hey, Sarah, can you do this job? Because if Sarah gets out there, she'll get in front of 300 people that maybe have not seen this before. Anyway, the point is that there's really no need for us to compete with each other. What we really need to do is to give the practice more visibility. So that's the first thing. Second thing I'd like to say about networking, right? So keep in mind that the colleague referrals, right? The word of mouth referrals, even from existing clients, this is all like, the associations and memberships, all of that is organic networking and knowing people face to face, okay? One of the rules that at least we at Lizard Brain try to hang on to is the rule of 2. And what that means is that unless it's like I'm getting out there and I'm facilitating one person, we call that coaching, I always have 2 people, right? There's me, usually as a facilitator, and then somebody else as a graphic recorder, or sometimes we flip that. And, you know, that person might facilitate a little bit, and then, you know, I'm doing the graphic recording. What the rule of 2 does, first of all, it provides a better experience for the clients, because now I'm not carrying the entirety of the mental load of what it takes in order to get this thing done, right? Right now, actually, Chris is helping me out. She's keeping an eye on the waiting room so that I don't have to, you know, if anybody's got any sort of tech challenges, Chris is right there. The analog in the room would be, all right, if for whatever reason, you know, like lunch is not here, so Chris could go and take care of that, right? So it's a better experience for the client, but then for us as facilitators, if you're always bringing in one other person, that's exactly 1/2 of the marketing that other person has to do. And if everybody's doing that, the need to just, you know, keep shoveling that coal into the furnace, it goes way down. All right, so those are just a couple of thoughts about the networking side. Any other thoughts about that before I shift over here? And Anita, that was kind of an answer to your question. Wasn't a very good one, but I think that those are the principles that are more important to get at. All right, let's shift over to the right side of this, and we're doing right where we should be on time. So a lead comes in. Lead can come in any number of ways. Usually we get an email, okay? The next step for us is we go from lead. Our goal is to get them on the phone, is to do what we call a discovery call, okay? Now I'm going to have another one, another Retooling you, where we do a deep dive into what discovery calls look like and what gets into them. But basically, your goal in the discovery call is to get everything that you need such that you can write a proposal. Okay. Now, there's a lot of people who do this different ways. Some people will write master services agreements with addendums that go underneath that. That's a pretty good model if you think you're going to have repeat business with this client. Like I said, most of our stuff is pretty one-off. So the way that we do it is that we'll put a proposal out there, and then at the bottom of that proposal, it says, sign here. Okay. And they click that, they sign there, they drop their digital signature into it. You know, there's a bunch of ways you can do that. You can use DocuSign. We just do everything in Acrobat. It says sign here, and now that proposal becomes our contract. Okay. And inside there, you've got like all the terms and conditions. What happens if there's like a late payment? What happens if there's a reschedule? What happens if there's a cancellation the day before, right? Let me just spend a quick second on this thing. I had to learn this the hard way. I had this one lead, because they weren't a client yet. I had this one lead say, hey, we want you, I don't know, April 1st. Okay, by the way, this is back in February. Here's the proposal. And I don't hear anything. I don't get a signed proposal back, right? March shows up. Guys, do you want me to do this work? I need a signed proposal back. I don't hear anything. I send a kind of a pointed email a couple of weeks before April 1st. I'm like, guys, okay, I don't know if this is happening or not, but if I don't hear back from you within 24 hours, I can't do the job, right? I don't hear anything. Now, what do you think happened the day before April 1st?
Hey, Brian, when will we meet you?
Hey, Brian, when will you be here? Exactly. And I'm like, guys, I have been blowing up your inbox and calling you for the last 2 months, right? Well, of course they were pissed off. There wasn't anything I could do about it, but that's where they landed. So now I have a signature by a date. You must get this back to me by this date. If you don't, I'm going to remind you, but if you don't get it back to me by that date, these terms are null and void. Okay. All right. So that's the proposal. Hopefully they sign it. We hope they sign it. We always hope they sign it. We go from proposal into the design work. Now, for me, this is really the fun stuff. You know, I love the design side of things. This is where we're planning out what's our approach going to be, what materials do we need. We're designing the facilitation guide. And then we do, after design, of course, you get to the delivery, where you're actually doing the work. And then after that, we get to aftercare, which includes any sort of deliverables, the invoice, of course, right? And then something that Chris and I will do is what's called an AAR. Len, you should know what an AAR is. What's an AAR?
I know it's a hot wash, but I can't remember what it means. Like
Yep.
hot wash
After
is something I'm not
action
used to.
report.
Yeah.
Did you have a TIFF? What was it?
After action report.
After action report, after action review, however you want to do it. Ours is really, really simple. We say what worked, what didn't, anything that we could do better. What else you got coming up? Because that's an opportunity to then go all the way back to do another discovery call too. And we have had that happen where an after action review will just naturally transition into another discovery call. So we call this our pipeline. Okay, this is really the life cycle of our projects, of our clients. Okay, I want to do a little bit of deeper dive into what happens when this goes wrong. But before I do that, what questions do you have about this? Still good? Tracking? Super good. Okay, let's see. The goal of every event is to create enough value that they want you back again. Yes, Jim, absolutely. Hopefully, fingers crossed. In fact, like, you know, we thought this was going to be a one-off, but, you know, now we decided that we need to do this. All right, let's consider for a second 100% of the leads that come in. These are the emails, right? This is like, we've got this thing. Hey, we heard about you. Hey, there's this thing that's going on. Here's what happens to about, well, let me say it this way. About 85% of them make their way to the discovery call, which is great, okay? About 60% of all the leads will make their way to a proposal. Sometimes we get to a discovery call and we just realize this isn't going to work for whatever reason. Maybe they want us to fly to Anchorage tomorrow, right? It's like, okay, there's no plane fast enough to do that. Unless you've got a Concorde that you're sitting on, we just can't do that work. And that happens sometimes, right? When we get to from proposal to design, that's about 55%. Only about 5% of proposals do we actually like lose, but I'll show you where I'm going with that. Then let's see, let me show you my math. Hang on a second, it's actually off screen. There we go. Design, that leads to 50%, sorry, 55%. And then about half of all of our leads do we actually deliver work for. I think that's pretty good, you know? So the question is, what happens to the other remaining 50%? We've done a little bit of, you know, data analysis, and here's what happens. About 5%, let me draw it first. About 5% of our leads, they just ghost us. Okay, we get the email, we send a nice email back, we say, let's pick a time to talk, and they just don't get back in touch with us. Let me just say this, that feels kind of not good. I was going to say crappy. It has nothing to do with you. All right. These, in general, these are people who are just putting feelers out there. They are treating our service like a commodity. That is not a referendum on how good of a person you are. So if somebody ghosts you, you just got to let that go. Okay. It's not about you. About 5%, they just drop the request. You know, we were thinking about it. We just don't need this thing anymore. Okay. They just decide, you know, that's not it. Another 5%, well, this actually leads to this big category over here, which is actually okay. So there's this big drop off right here. For us, about 13% of total leads, right? Accounting for that 50% that we don't actually land. 13% of total leads will get back to us after they read our proposal, or I give them a quote at the beginning, or I give them a ballpark at the very, very beginning of the lead, and they say, hey, you know what? You're too expensive. Or we don't have the money, or we don't have the budget for that, okay? Or they lost funding. That's something I'm hearing a lot these days, right? Oh, we lost the funding. We were gonna do this thing, but now the funding just dried up. Again, that's not a referendum on you. We talked a little bit about pricing before. Let me, you know, kind of give you just my thought on it. I try to be, when it comes to pricing, I try to be like right in the middle of the top third. Okay. So if you think about, like, let's do it this way. Here's all the graphic facilitators and, you know, graphic recorders that are out there. You've got kind of the bottom third, the middle third, the top third. I kind of want to be right here with my pricing. I don't want to be the most expensive thing in town, right? I certainly don't want to be the cheapest thing in town, but I do kind of want to be in this range, okay? Now, if they get back to me and they're like, I give them a number and it usually has 4 or 5 digits attached, and they're like, well, we thought this would be more like 3 digits attached. I say, well, no problem. That's perfectly okay. Let's go back to some colleague referrals. I know somebody who is just starting, or I know somebody who is like just trying to get their feet, or they're, you know, kind of a little bit earlier in their career. They may choose to do that, okay? Again, what we try not to do is to say, well, forget it, bang. It's who do I know that might be the best athlete for this thing? I have no problem hearing we don't have the budget, you're too expensive. That's great. That reaffirms that I'm right where I want to be, okay? Sometimes we lose people because they say, we went with someone else. And that's fine. You know, usually what they're not telling me when they say they went with someone else is that this person was also cheaper, which is fine. That also refers, you know, this, or they're more local. That's the other thing that happens. Okay. And by the way, the someone else thing, that to us, that only happens about 2% of the time. Without ego, people really like our discovery calls, and they really like us after they do a discovery call. You know, usually if we can get them here, we've got them for the rest of it. Okay. We usually try to give them a full, you know, here's the lizard brain experience right there at the discovery call. That's why our discovery calls are 45 minutes. I had a business coach once that said, you're spending way too much time doing intake with people. So I fired the business coach. You know, I really think that this is where you win or lose work with the discovery call. Your website is going to get them in. but how you show up and the way that you engage with them and the way that you partner with them to come up with a solution that works for them, I think that that happens right here. Okay. All right, so we've still got a little bit of math left over. And so even after the proposal, even during design, even back here, we will still lose when they say, hey, you know what? The whole event canceled. Okay. And for us, that's about a full 15% of the time. But these numbers are averaged over the last 5 or 6 years, and we all know what happened in around 2020. Okay. All right. And that's our pipeline. That's the way that we take a look at it. That's the way that we maintain it. For us, it's really just a Google sheet where we've tracked all of this kind of stuff. And so I can look at a moment's notice and say, all right, where are these folks in the pipeline? You know, are we waiting for signatures? You know, do I have to schedule some design work? How long has it been since we've invoiced? And I haven't heard back from folks. Okay. And that's it. That's what we wanted to show you. 2 things so you can sleep at night. Number 1, it's your safety net. It's the seed money that you set aside. Number 2, it's your pipeline, your book of business, which I think when you're first starting, it's all about who you know. It's about networking. It's about those organic connections. Don't spend too much time shoveling coal into the SEO furnace and with no idea knowing where it goes. Far better to make a connection with somebody that you do know and can actually give you some work. That's it. That's what I got for today. What questions do you have for me?
When it comes to word of mouth, do you think it's more important to be knowing and hanging around other facilitators or potential clients or both?
Let's talk about that for a second. And before I forget though, let me drop something into chat. Let's see if this works. Sometimes, oh, here we go. If you got any benefit out of this workshop, we are doing a pay what feels right model. This comes from Frederick Laloux in his book, Reinventing Organizations. You can buy me a cup of coffee if you want. If you got anything out of this, you know, just go ahead and click the link that's in chat right now. That helps me out a little bit so that we can keep doing these kinds of things. So Anita, let me answer your question about who it benefits you to hang around. First of all, there's no such thing as a generic facilitator, but let's assume that there is just for a second, okay? All facilitators are different. They have different areas of expertise. They've got different industries that they're familiar with. And so what I think makes a difference when you're hanging around other facilitators is really to double down on what you might consider to be your minor, okay? That's your area of focus. So people know me.
Like your minor?
Your minor, like your major, your minor, you know?
Okay.
Like the thing that like makes you unique in the field. Oh, thanks for that, Tim. I appreciate it. It's the thing that makes you unique in the field. So for example, people tend to come to me really for 3 reasons. Number 1 is the visual thing, okay? Number 2, the virtual thing. I'm pretty good at that. And then number 3, the strategic planning thing, which is really my bread and butter, okay? So if I know another facilitator, they land a piece of work, it happens to need one of those 3 areas. They know that using the rule of 2, they can reach out to me and I'm going to make them look awesome, okay? So another thing that you could do is to think about who are those folks that are orthogonal to the industry. And that's kind of a 50-cent SAT word, so let me define it. Who are those people that actually hire facilitators, okay? And depending on the industry that you're in, that might mean something very different. Like I've got a colleague who really is into churches and the ecclesiastical. I'm not anywhere close to that. But in that market, in that industry, you know, they know that if you're going to want, you know, sketch noting for a sermon, you talk to this person. Okay. So all of that to say, Anita, you could hang around facilitators. Just make sure that your unique value proposition is really, really clear, so that they know, okay, for this thing, I'm going to invite Anita.
Thanks.
What else you got?
Got a question.
Yes, sir. Go for it, Len.
So, I mean, you know a little bit about where I came from and the organization I worked with before. I came out of the Space Force. I pretty much did program management. I'm pivoting into this, which is what I spent the last 5 years of my career kind of building up the skills and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what my unique proposition is. Like, I mean, how do you even figure that out? Like, I just really, I know, I hear you when you say there's no generic, and that's absolutely true. And at the same time, it's like, I know what I'm good at. I have no idea how to sell it to non-military people. and I'm
You want
kind
me
of
to
not
tell you what you're
interested in
good
selling
at,
to
Len?
military.
Because you and I have worked together. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. First of all, I want to make sure my camera is still tracking me. There we go. All right. So Len, here's what you, Len, are specifically good at. And I just know this because Len and I have worked together. Okay. So first of all, Len has got really, really deep industry expertise. So he knows everything that there is to know about space. And so that means he could work for government. He could also work for, even bigger than that, the aerospace industry. He could work for contractors. And so that's his minor, so to speak. If he wants to be a facilitator, he should be talking to the aerospaces and the Lockheed Martins and the, fill in the blank, the folks that are in that line of work. But here's the other thing that I think makes Len unique. Okay. Aerospace, space, all of that stuff. I mean, that is really, really task-oriented stuff. Okay. It's really about, are we doing the right things? Very, very business-oriented. But here's the way that I've noticed that Len actually shows up and he presents himself as. So he is a really human-focused kind of guy, right? He tends to lead with relationships. Not so much about, all right, is this going to help our bottom line? But, what do we know about like the relationships that are there, right? Are we making sure that we're taking care of each other as human beings first? And both of these things are important. I think that sometimes aerospace as an industry tends to double down a little bit too hard on the task side of things. Okay. Now you need both of these things. It's almost like you could think of it as the wheels of a bicycle. Okay. And so if I was Len, and if I was talking about my value proposition, I would say, look, you have this, you've got the rear wheel of the bicycle, which gives you drive and forward momentum. You also need a little bit of this, which gives you direction. And more than that, balance. And that's what I, Len, can bring to this offsite. That's what I, Len, can bring to this strategic planning activity that you're about to launch into. Okay. So Len, if I were you, I would kind of double down on your own human side because the industry that you're in doesn't. Does that help?
That's accurate. Thank you. I'm still in the bike thing.
All right, cool. What other
Thanks, Brian.
questions do y'all have for me? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so we have a nice crisp close. Again, if you haven't done so already, click the button, buy me a coffee. It helps out, okay? I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. And I did share the link to this and other videos that you can see from Retooling yoU in the chat. Thanks a lot.